sounds more impressive than it really is, I think. It's definitely, can you hear me now? It's definitely a pleasure and an honor to be here. But I wanted to say, I really appreciate listening to the choir. You guys are beautiful. And it brings a tear to my eye to listen to some of the music for this morning. It warms my heart. It soothes my soul and experience the time and the attention that you've taken to recognize the sacrifices of all those who serve or have served, or the sacrifice and support of the families who support those who serve or have served in the armed forces. Thank you very much. And I also wish to extend my heartfelt thanks and appreciation to all of you that were so recognized today. This morning, I wish to speak to you about how God teaches that each one of mankind's sins is subject to the rule of law, is equal before God, and most importantly, that morals and truths exist. I want to highlight how our country's founding fathers captured these sentiments in our country's founding documents. But as I'll relate, our country's traveled path towards achieving the vision and goals inspired by God and described in our country's founding documents has not been exactly smooth or easy. In fact, we've hit some rough patches along the way, but our country has managed to make forward progress, and it continues to do so. In fact, not only have we made forward progress within our country, but we've also set an example for the rest of the world to follow. I feel that our country has achieved and progressed as it has because we found a way to eventually interact with each other with mutual respect, dignity, and most importantly, in a loving manner. I believe our country is a great country and will continue to be a great country. We just need to keep focused upon being respectful, dignified, and loving in our interactions with each other and with the rest of the world, and also to expect the same from others. Now, there are people in the world today who do not respect our nation, they don't respect our principles, our values, or our way of life. They seek to destroy us as a result. They will not win. We as a nation and as a leader of democracy in the world have already learned and demonstrated how, in the long run, such forces can and will be overcome and demolished. You'll see that as a country, we've experienced some trials and tribulations along the way, but we've learned, improved, and healed, then went forth out into the rest of the world to be a force for good, a good that counters evil and wickedness. Hopefully, once I'm done, you'll agree that God and our founding fathers recognize that there is diversity within mankind. Diversity not just in the obvious, sex, race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, etc., but also in how mankind goes about setting and accomplishing goals, making progress, and continuously improving for the good of all. We as a country just need to work together, be patient, be persevering, and be diligent. In November of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln had the following to say at the dedication of the Gettysburg Civil War Battleground Cemetery. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those here who gave their lives so that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here and have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Now, his remarks were in direct acknowledgement of what happened at Gettysburg this weekend, from 1 to 3 July of 1863. In fact, on this very day, in 3 July, historians note that the high water mark of the rebellion was reached at Gettysburg. At 3 p.m. on the afternoon of the 3rd, General Pickett led his fateful charge that nearly broke the Union lines on Cemetery Ridge just in front of the commanding general's headquarters, located at the center of the line. In fact, a Mississippi brigade is noted on that battlefield marker as actually achieving the furthest, most threatening penetration of the center of the Union lines that day. The day before, these very same Mississippians had nearly achieved a complete breakthrough of the Union lines at the Peach Orchard. Their achievements at the Peach Orchard on the previous day directly contributed to General Lee's assessment that the Confederates could defeat the better positioned Union troops. Thus, General Lee ordered, against General Longstreet's advice, to remain on the battlefield and set up for the largest artillery barrage in the history of this continent. 2 hours of continuous fire between dozens of artillery pieces, followed by Pickett's charge of 12,000 Confederates across a mile of open field towards 7,000 Union troops defending the center of the Union line at Cemetery Ridge. This charge was intended to break the Union's back and its will. As the attack progressed, the Confederates crossed the field, climbed over and through the fences, and faced a withering barrage of artillery and rifle shot. General Lee's desired outcome, to break through the Union line, capture the headquarters, and defeat the Union deep within its own territory, and thus ultimately to defeat the will of the Union to hold together these United States, was within minutes, yea, even within yards of achievement. The Union line wavered. It fell back, but it never gave way. In fact, it rallied, and with the arrival of reinforcements, counterattacked and seized the colors of the attackers. After 3 solid days of nonstop fighting from dawn to dusk, the Confederates left the field and retreated back to Virginia, never to venture forth into the Union territory again. The next day, the 4th of July of 1863, Vicksburg fell to the Union troops led by General Grant. 23,000 Union troops were killed, captured, or wounded at Gettysburg. 28,000 Confederates were killed, captured, or wounded there. That's 51,000 young American men killed, captured, or wounded in 72 hours, the bloodiest battle on the North American continent known to history. Estimates are that of the 51,000 casualties at Gettysburg that day, over 30,000 were killed. I start with this moment in our country's history because I believe God, as shown in today's scriptures, tells us that morals and values exist, and that man should observe the rule of law and not necessarily the authorities of man, because mankind sins. I also believe that God teaches us that every individual person is equal in the eyes of God. I also believe that our nation's founding fathers tried to capture these same ideals and values from God in our nation's founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. For example, our Declaration of Independence begins with, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Our U.S. Constitution preamble starts with, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States of America." Our country's founding fathers realized that they lived in an imperfect world and that men were imperfect. However, that never stopped them from trying their best to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons. They also realized that they lived in a world populated by people of different faiths, different belief systems, and of different races and stations in life. So our founders made a supreme effort to provide a framework for our fledgling country to start from, while also setting out goals and objectives for each of us to strive towards and grow towards. But they also realized that sometimes people will disagree, or perhaps act selfishly, or imprudently, in a manner that's not right. Now, we as a nation had, and to some degree still continue to have, a really big disagreement regarding whether or not it's the federal government's business to determine how a state conducts its affairs. Let me be clear. I believe that slavery was wrong and needed to be abolished. However, I wish that our ancestors could have found a better way to work through their disagreements and legitimate concerns regarding the time, the place, and the manner for abolishing slavery, as well as for recognizing and addressing the inevitable impact upon the local economy and social order that a sudden or even an eventual abolition of slavery posed for the South. The writers and signers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States recognized even then the difficulty that slavery posed upon our nation with regard to the set of values and ideals that they described within those founding documents. They were wise enough to recognize that our country's society and economy were not yet ready to develop and implement a solution. But they did keep the dialogue open. They kept the end goal in mind, and they made small, incremental efforts when they could to keep our country progressing towards fulfilling the ideal that all men are created equal, while also keeping in mind that all men are sinners. This struggle that we had with ourselves, I think, allowed our country to step in during the dark days of World War II and bring light back to Europe, Africa, and the areas of the Pacific, to beat back the fascism of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. As so eloquently described by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his 1941 State of the Union address to the 77th Congress, so this was within a month or two after Pearl Harbor. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to the world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first, is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which, translated into world terms, means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which, translated into world terms, means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. That kind of world is the very antithesis of the so-called new order of tyranny which the dictators seek to create with the crash of a bomb. To that new order, we oppose it with the greater conception, the moral order. A good society is able to face schemes of world domination and foreign revolutions alike without fear. Now, later on, during the Cold War, when the world of democracy and freedom faced the socialist and communist forces descending upon Eastern and Southern Europe and spreading across Asia, we were reminded by President Eisenhower in his farewell address to Congress in '61, our people expect their president and the Congress to find essential agreement on issues of great moment, the wise resolution of which will better shape the future of the nation. President Eisenhower then goes on to say, throughout America's adventure in free government, our basic purposes have been to keep the peace, to foster progress in human achievement, and to enhance liberty, dignity, and integrity among people and among nations. To strive for less would be unworthy of a free and religious people. Any failure traceable to arrogance or our lack of comprehension or readiness to sacrifice would inflict upon us grievous hurt, both at home and abroad. Later in this same speech, he says, progress toward these noble goals is persistently threatened by the conflict now engulfing the world. It commands our whole situation, absorbs our very beings. We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method. Unhappily, the dangers it poses promises to be of indefinite duration. To meet it successfully, there is called for not so much the emotional and transitory sacrifices of crisis, but rather those which enable us to carry forward steadily, surely, and without complaint, the burdens of a prolonged and complex struggle with liberty at stake. Only thus shall we remain, despite every provocation, on our charted course toward permanent peace and human betterment. He continues by observing, another factor in maintaining balance involves the element of time. As we peer into society's future, we, you and I, and our government, must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. He continues with, such a confederation must be one of equals. The weakest must come to the conference table with the same confidence as we do, protected as we are by our moral, economic, and military strength. That table, though scarred by many past frustrations, cannot be abandoned for the certain agony of the battlefield. Finally, he concludes with, "We pray that peoples of all faiths, all races, all nations may have their great human needs satisfied, that those now denied opportunity shall come to enjoy it to the full, that all who yearn for freedom may experience its spiritual blessings, that those who have freedom will understand also its heavy responsibilities, that all who are insensitive to the needs of others will learn charity, that the scourges of poverty, disease, and ignorance will be made to disappear from the earth, and that in the goodness of time, all peoples will come to live together in a peace guaranteed by the binding force of mutual respect and love." Mutual respect and love. These words that were uttered by President Eisenhower lead me now to reflect upon another cemetery, one that is also filled with Civil War soldiers who share their final resting place with this local community. Columbus's Friendship Cemetery is a location where the idea of Memorial Day first flowered. Back then, it was called Decoration Day, and started out as an intention by some ladies of Columbus to honor the unknown Confederate soldiers interred there after dying in the Battle of Corinth. One of these ladies cried out that she was a mother and could not bear to not also decorate the graves of the Union soldiers also buried there at the time. So these ladies decorated all the graves of the fallen Civil War soldiers. It was a time of healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation. Their thoughtful acts were soon noted by Horace Greeley in his New York Tribune newspaper. His remarks were read by Cornell professor Francis Miles French, who was so moved that he composed the poem, "The Blue and the Gray." I think this is a good moment to pause and reflect upon two of my favorite Bible verses. Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me." And Deuteronomy 31:6, "Be strong and of good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee." We live in an imperfect world, filled with imperfect people. But God expects each of us to do our best, to always try, to seek right and truth, dignity and justice. Our great country is founded upon these principles. So let's go out and just do it. Thank you. God bless each and every one of you, and may God bless our country, the United States of America.